Okay, welcome to getting started with Exploiter. In this video, I'm going to try to go over how to get the application up and running, how to build your initial cache for your exploits, your exploit vulnerability cache, and then in addition to that, probably the most dangerous thing I could expose you to, which is getting started with player hunting. I feel like that's a pretty good demonstration of the core loop of how to use Exploiter. So first things first, in my case, I've got Exploiter running. Just as a demonstration, your exploiter setup should look something similar to this, where you have your binary somewhere next to apt client is really helpful. Ignore cache, yours won't start with it. I'll get to that in a moment. Make sure that you have crypto for doing your various decipher work. Meta exploit is pretty crucial, as well as lib RShell if you want to get into utilizing RShells. I won't cover that in this video, just in general, but this should be pretty good starting situation. The very first thing that you're going to want to do is run db create. Now this is going to create the actual database that you've got. In my case, I'm going to select no, but in your case, you probably won't even get this prompt. The next thing that you're going to want to do is, let's take a look at Sour here. Sour is a way to scan random routers and then build up a database or look for a specific library version. So if I run, for example, Sour kernel router at 3.0.3, it's going to look at random networks until one of them finally shows a kernel router utilizing that specific version. This one is 163, so it would respond if I had searched for 163 instead. Alternatively, if you run Sour just by itself, or even with the max flag, you can begin to build your database. One really good way to do that is after you create your database, is run Sour and then run like 1,000. This is going to take quite a while, especially if you have really slow hardware. In my case, I have 4 CPUs running at nearly 5 gigahertz per CPU, and so it'd be rather fast. But for the sake of brevity, I'm not really going to demonstrate that now. Just know that when you get started, you might want to run Sour a few times and actually build up that cache database. But okay, so to get started, let's go ahead and look at player hunting. So we've created our database, we've ran Sour to expand our cache database. Now we're actually ready to start doing something. Very first thing that you're going to want to do is get off of your home network. This is really important. Another player might be able to find your IP somewhere in some log and then trace it all the way back to where you are. There is a command specifically built for this. I really hope that I put a description in here. This one's going to be called prepare. Prepare. Okay, I need to update the description. The description update will come soon, but what prepare does, contrary to you knowing what it does, is it jumps you to a random network that it can automatically get a root shell on. And so it does that in a number of different ways. How it does it's not super important. All you need to do is type prepare. And if you notice your IP not changing, i.e. if it stayed this 163, in my case, it's trying to switch to 11. If it stays at 163, run prepare again. It means that it had failed to go to a new network. In this case, it ran the brute force password cracker, and it has switched me to another network. If you want to be extra safe, you don't need to do this, but you can run prepare again. And here's an example of it. It couldn't find a way to get root shell, and so I'm just going to run prepare again. And this one was far faster to crack. And so you've noticed that I've actually got 2 targets now. Let's go ahead and take another look at that. So if I type targets, I can see that I have root level access on a shell here and a shell here, one at this WAN, one at this WAN. In both cases, it's running on the router. And that doesn't really mean a whole lot. It uses your own hardware if you want to do scanning. But in my case, I'm going to go ahead and drop this first target because I don't really need it. So I'm going to do targets. Oops. Targets unlock. I can spell unlock 0. You notice that's no longer locked. I'm going to go targets delete. And that's just going to delete everything that isn't locked. Now I'm working with a clean slate here. Let's go ahead and open up the browser and let's get started, shall we? So browser open. I'm going to go ahead and something that's really fun is you can go to recent websites and you can just start hacking, random websites that players have created. That oftentimes that requires a lot more unique attack vectors, but in any case, let's start with hunting. Let's go, instead of new players, let's hunt more experienced players. Let's go search for police. So what I'm doing here is I'm searching in GSearch, I'm searching for police, and I'm doing this because I know that other players out there are looking to increase their rep or something. They're looking to increase their rep and gain levels and make money and things of that sort. And so players might, on the white hat variety, search for police missions, and so they're going to visit police websites. So I'm going to capitalize on that, and I'm going to go ahead and do just an example. Let's do grab logs. And I'm going to pass -c, and that's going to do, actually, let's go ahead and look at the help. So grab logs, you can pass the corrupt flag, and that's going to corrupt the logs after attempting to download them. This will only occur if it's actually successful in downloading those logs. I'm not going to use dir right now, but essentially you run corrupt logs, you pass the IP address, and then the port. And all of these are websites, so I'm always going to be using port 80. So grab logs, -c, and then I'm going to say www.likufub.info for this top example here. I really wish you could right click, but don't do that, it'll visit the site. So I'm going to grab logs, I'm going to corrupt, this is the target, and this is the IP. And so it's going to automatically try to acquire a root shell, and in this case it was able to do so, and it was indeed able to download those logs. Those logs are automatically hard-coded to download to /root downloads. So if you want to override that, you would have to supply the dir flag. So let's go ahead and look at our log viewer. And I'm going to do root downloads system.log. Yes, we do have hits. Very good. Okay, I'm going to erase my hits only because I don't want to accidentally start chasing my own tail. I don't plan on re-uploading this log at all, so I'm only clearing the logs just so I can more organized. It's just so I can be more organized. Speaking of organization, let's go ahead and clear our output. Now let's focus on this 32.32.15.203. 32.32.15.203. I'm going to run nmap on it so I can see what ports might be open. Something fun that you can do, if you want to look at the firewall rules for any given target, you just pass the -f, and it will show you firewall rules if there happen to be any. Anyway, in this case, I can see that whoever this player was probably came from a player network, and I can determine this because this octet right here is not 0. Player networks in the current patch will always have the third octet be 0. That is always going to be the case. It's not changeable in the current version of the game. In any case, that doesn't really change my attack pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and grab logs again. I'm going to grab logs, see on this IP address, and I'm going to not specify a port because that's going to default to 0, which is the router. I want the router logs. I want the logs from the edge router of a given network, because if a player exists in there, I'll be able to see where they've gone. So let's go ahead and grab logs. Nicely enough, I do have a root shell, and I have downloaded the logs again. Note that if I close this, I won't be able to reopen it because it replaced the existing system log. So I'm going to leave this window open and open up the new logs. In this case, you can see that whatever player hit the site on this date, what was it, September in game? It's now October in game, so it's relatively recent, but not so recent that they didn't clear the logs themselves. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that record and move on. Grabs log C 206.198.39.122, and again, I'm not going to specify a port because it defaults to 0. I want the router logs. Starts with a guest shell, brute forces passwords, and then escalates to a root shell. Downloads the logs. Oh, player has been here. Last accessed in June. Still, it's a decent enough example. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this. I'm going to pretend that this player is far more active. I'm just going to ignore that record down there. Okay, let's go ahead and scan manually. We're going to scan this. So grab logs, let me restart. Grab logs will automatically do a bunch of stuff for you. One of the first things that it does is scans on the port that you specify with grab logs, which in my case was nothing, so it defaults to 0. In this case, scan, you could specify 0, or you could specify nothing because it, again, defaults to 0. So I'm going to scan that IP. I'm going to jump to 2. And what that's going to do is it's actually going to change my sort of operating location. When I run nmap, I'll be able to look inside the network. rather than from my current location. So I'm going to jump to the second target, and that's going to change from a root to a guest, and the IP changed as well. And now I'm going to run chainsaw with the login parameter. If you run just chainsaw by itself, it's going to give you the password. If you run it with the login parameter, it will automatically log you in afterwards, which you can do manually, like login, root, and then you specify the password. So now I have a root shell. My first target is locked. I don't need these other targets for now, so I'm going to do targets delete. There we go. So I know that the player would be at this IP address, and I could nmap 192.168.0.19, and if they were on and they had ports available, I could look at that, but there's also some pretty cool tooling available to you. Some of that tooling relies on bounces or bounce exploits, and we can look for bounce exploits, or we can upload libraries that we know already have bounce exploits. But because this is a getting started video, I'm going to assume that you don't already have net 107, and you're going to look for bounce exploits just as any other normal new player would. And to do that, scan local. Before we do that, let me go and give you an example. What scan local is going to do is it's going to scan every single locally registered library in the system, and it's going to generate a target for every single exploit found in those libraries. If you have not built up your cache database fully, this can take some time. The duration of the scan will be completely depend on your cache population, as well as the hardware in your computer, or what CPUs that you're using are more specifically. So let's do that. Scan local. And everything was in my cache database. You can see I have a lot of empty targets here. The good thing about this is some of these are going to be bounce exploits, and you know that they are bounce exploits based on, gosh, I really hope that one of them is a bounce. It might not, it might not be. But anyway, so let's go ahead and try to bounce to the router's LAN. That way it just bounces to itself. You can see there's one guest bounce here. Sadly, it's not a root bounce, but a guest bounce will be sufficient for what we're trying to do. Go ahead and targets lock 47 because I'm going to delete everything else. You can see that 47 was indeed locked. Targets delete, and now I have a shell and I have a bounce. Now I get to do my favorite thing, which is run connected. And connected, I can specify the shell as 1. I want to specify the shell target for the WAN and a bounce target for the WAN. What this is going to do is it's going to propagate throughout the network and generate a target for every single unique LAN device in the network. So I specify the shell as 1, I specify the bounce as 2, and that's going to run some code and generate a bounce for every single target in the network. Now, I'm looking for this player. Sadly, they're not online anymore. We can see that the final IP address in the 0 octet is 3. We're looking for 19. This player is no longer online. However, something that you can do to sort of recoup your lost time is run this command, files, and I'm going to specify a start of 2 and an end of 19. So in this case, I'm going to specify I want to start here and end here. And for every single one of these targets, I'm going to generate and aggregate a mail file, a bank file. Map is even something you can do. And if you're really player hunting, you can do browser. And that's going to get you back some caches or some configuration files that players and NPCs keep on their computers. In this case, I'm going to look for bank. And so now I have a list of a bunch of different banks that I can log in a various network. I can crack each one of these hashes. It does take time depending on your CPU. And then I can start transferring money from this guy to this guy, transferring money from this guy to this guy, and like pooling all of my money to one NPC, and then stealing from the one NPC utilizing something called corrupt transactions. So corrupt transactions is something that you would use on the bank that you're transferring from or to, as well as your own bank. So that way you can avoid getting caught by the police. But anyway, that's not for this video. That's for something else entirely. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump back to our 0 target. Targets I have a root shell here, so I'm going to go corrupt targets 1, or sorry, corrupt logs 1. Actually, before I do that, targets -L. This is going to show that the log types for each one of these targets is a binary. And if I want to corrupt a log, it's going to transform it into a text file, and that's going to remove any sort of entries in the log so that NPCs can't trace you as well as players can't trace you. So to do that, corrupt logs, I'm going to specify 1. Now if I run targets with L, I can see that the first target here, this LAN right here, its log file is now a text. And if I corrupt logs all, it's going to fail for all of the guests, but it's also going to corrupt this 0 here. So note, unable to edit specified log file because it's all guest level access. But if I do targets L, you can see that some of them, the guests did have write permissions, silly enough. But most importantly, my root shells have corrupted logs now. So I'm on 0 right now. Let's go ahead and do targets unlock, targets delete. It doesn't delete the target you've actively selected. So now I can lock that target again, and we can move on with our player hunting. So let's remove this record. And let's do grab logs -C 1.0.130.128, and this will be my last one for demonstration purposes. In this case, I had a guest shell. It promoted me to a root shell, and it's downloading that log file. Let's go ahead and take a look. We can see, yes, as recently as May, which is also quite a ways away, there was a player on 1.16. So let's go ahead and infiltrate this network again. I'm going to go ahead and just reuse the password that I saw up here. Login, root. Oh, first I need to jump, sorry. Jump 15. Login, root. And now let's do targets delete. Scan local, hoping for any root bounces, and we can determine if it's a root bounce by bouncing, and we don't have any root bounces. But let's go ahead and demonstrate what a root bounce does look like. I have one library right here. So if I upload the library that I have to the lib location of the router that I'm currently jumped onto, now I can targets delete. I can scan the local library net. And I know I want to scan net because that's the one that I uploaded. So now if I bounce to the router, I see this root bounce. Well, the nice thing about 107 is most cases, the root bounce will always be there. It technically has requirements, but almost every single system I've ever encountered fulfills the requirements, and so this is a really, really effective library to retain in your own sort of hack tool arsenal. If you come across net library at version 107, really consider downloading it. I'm going to do targets lock 7, targets delete, and I'm going to do connected with a shell of 1, a bounce of 2. And that's going to generate a target for every computer in the network. And now I get to demonstrate this active column. Active means an NPC is logged into this machine. So if I use 16 here and I type PS, I can see that this user here is logged in. It's just not super useful, but what is useful is when a target has when it has player processes running. So like an RShell or something like that, that'll show up as something else. So very quickly, I already have root, so I'm going to do service install RShell. Oh, that's right, I need to jump off. So currently I'm on the target right now, so I need to use the target that I'm already on. So you can see that I've last jumped to this address with this WAN. So I'm just going to use 1. Jump and use are a little bit different. Use will sort of interact with a target. Jump will change where you're interacting from. Anyway, so now I'm using this target. I can go ahead and service install RShell. And let's go ahead and do nmap on myself to make sure that I'm currently listening on this port. We can see that, yep, RShell is indeed running. And so now let's go back to 16. Use 16, files, mail. I'm just going to pretend this is a player. Now I want to send an RShell to this player, right? Or rather, let's do from this player. So I'm going to go ahead and crack that right there. I'm going to mail with the login parameter. That's going to open up a mail window for me to log in. I'm going to copy that password in. I'm going to copy that that email in. And now let's go ahead and look at, let's do 12. Why not? Now, if I do files mail, let's say I want to RShell this guy. So I'm going to email them the funny game. And I installed RShell on this network here. So let's go ahead and send them. Now they ran it. It's gory. Oh no. So now if I type targets with the P flag, I can see the active again. You'll notice that, yes, there's a player process here. What player process might that be? Well, that would be this RShell client. If I were to kill that process, I no longer have the RShell, but it no longer shows that the player process is running. So anyway, let's go ahead and do that again. Just for example, let's go ahead and send this individual the RShell one more time. And now, in order to actually use the RShell or to gain a shell from the target, you notice that they don't have any ports. So how else would you get in but to jump back, or sorry, to use back to this this shell right here. And then I'm going to run RShell targets. This is going to generate a target for every single connected victim. So you'll notice we have a new shell here, and I can jump to 20. Notice that the LAN will change. And so now I'm on here. I already know the root password, but it's a little faster sometimes to just run Chainsaw with a login parameter. Huge thank you to Nitro for developing Chainsaw. It has been a huge lifesaver to me. Anyway, now I have a root shell on a computer that I normally wouldn't have been able to get into from exploits, scanning, and things of that sort. You can printfs to take a whole look of what's going on here. If somebody had updated their cache or their repository, you can cat a file and look at what's inside of it. Maybe they've added an IP address here that you can go look at. Anyway, this video is getting long and I am rambling, but this is the first of hopefully many videos to come on the tutorial of getting familiar with Exploiter. So anyway, happy hacking.